Hello and welcome everyone to the first of the top 8 matches. We are here with myself, Caminet, also known as Chris, and Bobby. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. And Kami, it's nice to be here with you. Today we have green-white beatdown aggro on Daniela's side against Living End, the deck you brewed, Kami, in our last 5-6 tournament.
Yeah, I'd like to formally apologize to some people in the comment section of the previous tournament for introducing this one to the format. But on the Living End side, it looks like we've got quite an interesting hand. We've got 3 cyclers, a removal spell, and perfect mana. How's it looking for Daniela?
So Daniela's got a bit of an awkward 6. He's got a fortified village and a temple of plenty. So right now they're both going to come into play tapped. He's got a 1-drop, a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and he's got a restoration angel. So if he can, it looks like he's on the play. So he's going to have a bit of an awkward start. If he just had like a forest to go with this fortified village, I think he'd be off to the races here. It's really going to be important for Daniela to curve out smoothly because, I mean, this is just a race for him, right? This is going to be some premium pod racing. He sees another Temple of Plenty off this scry, and I think he, what did he do with that one? Put it on top. So he's going to keep the 3rd land, even though it's also tapped. So this is going to be a slow start for Daniela.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Game 1, the race is going to be on for Daniela. The decision from Warrior Dwarf here, he's bottomed a land on his mulligan and then instantly had the unpredictable Cyclone off the top. So he's going Mountain and probably going to see Imposing Vantasaur or Ceradon cycled on end step. I don't think it's worth holding up Dead Gone here.
Yeah.
In terms of a race, I think game 1 certainly it's definitely on Daniela to be the beat down and try and progress the game as quick as possible. Games 2 and 3, maybe that changes as he tries to be a more controlling deck. As the onus is always on Warrior Dwarf. It's a much faster, more consistent deck in terms of disrupting what Daniela's trying to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Daniela's deck normally has some disruptive elements, at least in terms of facing other interactive decks. But here, pretty much all his creatures text flavor text. I mean, hexproof, indestructible, exiling instants and sorceries. None of that matters in this matchup. And Daniela went ahead and bottomed a Avacyn Archangel, which makes sense.
There's an interesting decision point there from Warrior Dwarf. He decided to remove the Dryad Militant, which, interestingly, he didn't draw a land, and at the moment he's going to have to try and double cycle to try and find one.
Yeah, it's also interesting that he would. Sorry, Kami. It's also interesting he'd want to put creatures in the yard at this point. And Daniela is actually about to cast a creature that he can sacrifice. So if he wants to, he'll be able to get a little bit of a board post Living End.
Yeah, and so Dryad Militant doesn't really have text in here. It's just a Savannah Lines. It's a 2/1 beater. It's the exiling a instant or sorcery, even though obviously Living End is a combo deck. It doesn't really matter if the Violent Outbursts or the Living Ends themselves go into the graveyard, because once they're gone after being cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he cycled twice here and luckily topped a land. So he's going to have 2 looks at the moment with his current hand at finding a Cascade spell, but nothing else.
Okay, so he doesn't have a Cascade spell yet.
No, not yet.
Daniela draws a Loxodon Smiter, which, again, Warrior Dwarf isn't going to be making him discard anything. What Daniela really wants to find here is a Glitleaf Liege. Pretty much every single creature except maybe like Restoration Angel in Daniela's deck is green and white. So Glitleaf Liege is a 4/4 for 4 that gives all his creatures +2/+2, which just hugely accelerates the clock.
Oh yeah, I mean it turns out Dryad Militant from a 1-mana 2/1 into a 1-mana 4/3, which is a hell of a rate.
Oh yeah, and Daniela's got a really interesting decision here. He can play the Loxodon Smiter, or he can hold up Restoration Angel, which is interesting because if Warrior Dwarf were to go for like a Violent Outburst or a Bloodbraid Elf next turn, he could flash in Restoration Angel after the Living End resolves. And actually, because he can sack this Rhino here, he would have a full board, if he saves his mana. But it looks like he's going to go ahead and cast this Smiter instead.
I think that's a sound decision at the moment. Warrior Dwarf probably would have done it on combat, I think, having something to sack just to save the damage if he had an instant speed. He's chose to go for a 2-mana cycler first, as opposed to cycling one of his 1-manas. He's not found a land or a Cascade spell yet. I think it was wrong to try and go for the Titanite. I probably would have gone for the Vantasaurs or the Deadshot Minotaur in an attempt to find lands or a Cascade spell.
Yeah, and then if you hit more 1-mana Cascaders or Cyclers, you can just keep going.
So I think here he probably should cycle the Vantasaur. Just
Main
for
phase.
maximum information. Yeah, main phase, just to see, just in case maybe like a Dauntless Fango goes onto the stack or something like that. Now he doesn't
Alright, so
really know if he needs to use that dead gun.
Danielle is going to hit for 7 here. Now he's faced with a really interesting decision. He drew a Dryad Militant and he has a Fleece main line, so he can put lethal for next turn on the board, but he opens himself up to a big Living End blowout, or he can hold up the Restoration Angel play that we talked about.
I think Restoration Angel is probably the play here. Because next
Yeah,
turn,
he can either shove all his chips in basically, or he can hedge his bets. I guess Restoration's still lethal next turn. So yeah, I like holding up Restoration Angel.
I think here, yeah, I agree completely. He goes for the Fleece main, so he's going to present lethal as quick as humanly possible. So now, unless, oh wow, he's
Yeah,
going for it. I like it. I like it.
I'm not sure because I mean, if he holds up Restoration Angel, it's possible that even if Warrior Dwarf had the Cascade spell, maybe he gets greedy, thinking that he doesn't have lethal on board and doesn't go for it.
Interesting.
It's not very likely, but
just because I think he's panicking here, maybe he needs to slow down a little bit. Because I've seen he chose to use colored mana to cycle the Vansaur and then took damage to cycle the Minotaur, which, and that's just, when you're facing down an aggressive deck that's trying to put lethal down the way that he's just done, that could lead to 1 point of damage.
And the killing the Dryad Militant there doesn't actually change the clock at all.
No, and unfortunately, he's not found a Cascade spell off any of these cycles. He's got a Titanus Rex in hand, and it looks like Daniela's going to get this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Danielle's deck. It puts down a very, very fast clock.
Yeah, so he's gone in total down to, he's down to 39 cards in deck, and he didn't manage to find a single Cascade spell.
I mean,
so
Kami, both you and I have played Living End and Modern for years, and this is the deck does have a fail rate. You try to make it as consistent as possible, but it happens.
Absolutely. I mean, anyone who watched any of the videos of the previous tournaments saw how brilliantly consistent it was that I ended up with at least 2 Living Ends in hand. So Daniela takes down game 1 and we go to sideboarding.
Yeah, Daniela positioning himself to pull off the upset. I mean, coming into this, I think everyone thought rightly that Living End is the huge favorite, and it still probably is after sideboard. But Daniela has some tools. He's got a couple Sentinel totems, which probably you've never seen in Modern before, but a nice cheap for this format graveyard piece of interaction. He's got a couple warships that, if he can just get one of his creatures in the yard, like a rhino that sacks, the indestructible rhino, or if Daniela kills one of his, Warrior Dwarf kills one of his creatures, then worship means that as long as he has a creature on the board and a creature in the yard, he can basically never lose the game. He's got Nevermore to stop him from casting Living Ends.
So the thing that Danielle's got to be really careful about is overboarding, because whilst I think post-board he still has to be aggressive, but he's got to be controlling. If I were him, I'd just bring in the 2 worships and the Nevermore. I wouldn't bring in the Return to Nature or the Condemn.
No, so it looks like what he's done is he's cut 3 Dromica's commands and 2 Dryad Militants and brought in the 2 Sentinel totems, the 1 Nevermore, and the 2 worships.
That's exactly how I'd sideboard if I was trying to face Living End. Interestingly, Warrior Dwarf reaching for the Crashing Footfalls here. He's taking out 2 Titanith Rexes, put in 2 Crashing Footfalls.
Is he bringing in Ingot Chewer? I feel like, he knows that it's an open decklist tournament, so he knows Daniela has the Sentinel totems. And I feel like, he's got only 1 Ingot Chewer in the sideboard. This has to be what it's for, right? To kill little graveyard artifacts.
Yeah. If I were going to sideboard for this, the only thing I'd change is I'd probably take out one of the dead Gons and put in the Ingot Chewer. I don't want to be touching the dead side of it. I want to be maybe wary of the fact that the worship is the thing that I lose to, keeping the Gon half of it just to bounce creatures and then try and swing for lethal from try and do something clever like that in case we get the loop setup like you were talking about. The other option is Ravenous Trap. That could be quite useful for the interesting text on it. Just read Ravenous Trap is it says if they were put into his or her graveyard from anywhere this turn. So if you Living End once, then cast Ravenous Trap, get rid of that or Living End again, you can then clear the board if you've got a worship on. And I'm not sure if Warrior Dwarf's seen that.
Yeah, the one thing I would have changed from Daniela's side, actually, and he's going to 5 here, he drew a bunch of clunky hands, is I actually would have kept the Dryad Militants just to try to curve out aggressively and cut the Vivians, because the Vivians are pretty grindy.
So we've gone 5 as well with Warrior Dwarf. We've kept 3 lands, a Violent Outburst, and a Vantasaur.
So Warrior Dwarf is looking at 3 lands, a totem, 2 Path to Exiles, and a Vivian. bottoms a Vivian, and looks like he's going to bottom a Path here. Yep, so he keeps the Graveyard Hate and a Path to Exile, but he has no creatures. So, I mean, Warrior Dwarf is going to have time here to recover from an Exile Graveyard.
Yeah, I think Danielle is incentivized to mulligan quite aggressively, particularly having taken down game one. He can afford to try and find the Sentinel Totems, or Nevermore in particular. And
Yeah, that's fair.
definitely rewarded here. And with the Scry on Sentinel Totem, it's not too bad mulliganing. And
That's
on the
true. He
draw.
just topped a Fleece Mane Lion, so he's got something to start pressuring.
Excellent. So we've got a Rootbound Crag. The only two things we've got to cycle here are a Cyclone and a Street Wraith. Street Wraith obviously increases the clock, and Cyclone's not too relevant in this match. I'd have cut that, and I'd have cut that if I was going to bring in the Footfalls like Warrior Dwarf.
Yeah, I was going to say during sideboarding, Footfalls doesn't seem like, to me, what you want to be doing in this matchup, because it honestly will start to get outsized by a lot of Daniella's stuff as soon as he gets like a Glintleaf Leech down, or even just Loxodon Smiters already match up with it.
I agree. I mean, it's not really something that you want to use too offensively in this style. I mean, he's drawn mono lands here. We've got Violent Outburst and 3 lands.
Yeah, so an important thing to note, I think, for people who didn't see the first 5-6 tournament is, because this is a Cascade Living End deck and not, like an Electro Dominance or As Foretold deck, you don't have control over when you're using those Crashing Footfalls, right? Like, when you Cascade, you're randomly hitting either the Footfalls or the Living End, and you don't know which one it'll be. So there'll certainly be moments where you really want to hit your Living End because that might be your only out, and you're going to hit a Crashing Footfalls.
And during deck construction, the main thing that I was wary of was, because the Cascade spells are, as you said, Violent Outburst and Bloodbraid Elf, the sideboard is built so that if you are going to be bringing in anything, you want to be able to hit it off a Cascade spell. So, for example, if you're looking at your Nahiri's Wraths, you want to bring those in, in the.
I was wondering if Nahiri's Wrath might be a cheeky inclusion he could have brought in, because, I mean, he doesn't care about dumping his whole hand, and you can pretty easily wipe 3/3s and 4/4s off the board with Nahiri's Wrath.
Absolutely, particularly with Titaneth Rex. That's 11 damage right there.
All right, so it looks like Warrior Dwarf is going to force the issue here, try to get him to pop the totem. This will do.
That's very preemptive.
Yeah, and what this will do though for Daniela actually is the Living End will still resolve. So Warrior Dwarf won't get, if he hits Living End, of course. Now Warrior Dwarf won't get any creatures back, but Daniela will get a creature in the graveyard, which means future Living Ends now at least he'll get something back.
Very true. I'm just so if we got preemptive GG though, I'm not quite sure. This game looks like it's very much.
Yeah, I don't. Did Daniela just send that? I missed that. Wasn't looking at chat.
Yeah, looking at the timestamps. Or is that just lagging on my part?
It might be lagging. I think it was from the last match.
Oh, okay.
So Daniela right now has
in the graveyard and a Carabid off the top for Warrior Dwarf, so can start again. And he's found a Footfalls, which you can suspend. It's the only suspend card that we can in the deck.
Yeah, actually, the suspend actually seems decent here, because I mean he's not under a lot of pressure. Daniela right now just has a land, a Path, and an Archangel Avacyn. And Archangel Avacyn can't kill anything. Oh, but Daniela just drew a Worship. Now things get very interesting.
Well, I do very much like the inclusion of Worship in Daniela's deck. So has he got the 5th land?
He does not yet. He just has a Path and an Avacyn. But Daniela's deck is just half or more creatures, so at some point he's going to draw one.
And again, in the face of something like Worship, those Footfalls really just don't look great.
So, based on how Warrior Dwarf sideboarded, does he have any outs here to this Worship, given that there's a creature in the graveyard? Does he have any way to get Worship off the board or to get this creature out of the graveyard?
No, he doesn't. The only thing that he can do is try and use the Dead Gons to bounce creatures into hand and set up a lethal attack. But that's, he's only got 4 in the deck, so if Daniela just gets a critical mass, then what he would have to do is, at the current situation, just let Daniela commit to the board, then Living End on end step, untap, Gon the Lion and swing for lethal. That'd really be the only way.
Yeah. I guess he could also try to do some cheeky stuff with Cyclone, where Daniela attacks in, and then you cycle some stuff, get some creatures as sneaky blockers, and clear up the board that way. But
absolutely, but Yeah, I think the match could be decided just on the sideboarding here. And I'm not sure if Warrior Dwarf recognized the impact the worship could have.
If he did, though, I mean, what were his? I'm not super familiar with Warrior Dwarf sideboard. What were his outs in the sideboard?
As I was saying, you can try and get very cute with the Ravenous Trap. So if they are committing a bit too heavily, wipe the board with a living end, Ravenous Trap, get rid of his graveyard after you've put everything in there, and then living end again, so
Right,
that you can
right.
get around the worship so he's not getting anything back. The other option is to, obviously, with the Ingot Chill, which you didn't bring in, it's not. It was a pretty big oversight, I must admit, when I was building the deck, not looking at enchantments or anything like that. But these dead gons are, at the moment, looking like they're going to be useful, because the Crashing Footfalls, I think, has 2 more turns left on it. That's 8 power. And he's
Only
got
one. He should get it next turn.
next turn. So we'll be
Yeah,
able to
but
at least bounce that 2 turns in a row. Maybe if he can set up some overconfidence from Daniela, but the Avacyn is going to be able to save. I'll be able to save it, or at least do a ambush Viper roll.
yeah. I mean, the Avacyn will put. I mean, so still 3-turn clock from the Avacyn, but he does have a path to deal with one of the rhinos. What is in Warrior Dwarf's hand right now?
It is 2 dead gons.
Yeah.
I think so far Danielle looks set up to take this one home.
It would be quite an upset.
Oh god, yeah. The draw for turn was Crashing Footfalls, which he's obviously had to suspend.
Now I wonder if Daniela is going to go for the throat here with Avacyn, or if he'll remain patient.
So I wonder if we can see. I wonder if we can see. The only thing that Daniela really has to be worried about is keeping a creature in, and
yeah, he chose not to cast the Avacyn.
I think that's the correct. Well, he only had. Oh, yeah, he did have 5 mana. I think the only thing that matters from Danielle's perspective is keeping a creature on board. He can flash it in at the end of turn, at the end of Warrior Dwarf's turn if he has to, and just let Warrior Dwarf overcommit with attacks. You know, he's got to put a clock down in some capacity, at least attack with 1 or 2. But
yeah, he just drew a Dauntless Escort, which is another creature he can sack in the face of a living end. So I think now he's deciding how he wants to approach this turn. Does he want to play the Dauntless Escort? Does he want to? I guess he could attack with the Lion and then use its ability on a creature that he plays. He could just hold up Avacyn. He could try to do the cheeky Avacyn indestructible thing. That doesn't really get him anywhere.
no, it doesn't. And also to note, now any Cascade spell, since he drew the second Footfalls, he only brought in 2, will be a living end.
Okay.
And he's now got the mana to cast Ceradon, Deadshot Minotaur, and Bloodbraid Elf. We're not too far away from Titanus Rex either.
And it will make sense for Warrior Dwarf to be attacking, right? Because I think he wants to get Daniela to 1 life so that he can, at the opportune moment, find a way to get the board clear.
Absolutely. His graveyard at the moment is quite anemic. You know, he's got a better board state, so he has to try and be aggressive.
Yeah, he's really drawn quite a lot of lands.
Yeah, he has.
So Daniela has decided. He's decided to cast the Escort, which I think is a good move. The Escort is valuable in a few different ways. Just going wide, getting another creature in the graveyard. If he doesn't know that that Warrior Dwarf has 2 dead gods, but if he gets 2 creatures in the graveyard, that's just so much more peace of mind.
Absolutely, and this may force him to swing in with the 2 rhinos. He draws another land.
I mean, what he might do here is path one of the rhinos, double block the other, and then suddenly the board's clear again.
Because he can give Indestructible to something else. He could even just chump.
Yeah.
If he just chumps with the Dauntless Escort, gives the...
With the way this game is going, I mean, knowing that the game is going to go long, I almost wonder if it was correct for Warrior Dwarf to not attack until he gets these other rhinos. Because also, I mean, he's leaving his defenses down, and with the way the life totals are at and the way this game's going with worship, I don't think he's the aggressor right now.
No, I agree, but in the same vein, he's still got to get him as low as possible, and he has got these dead gons in hand, which do give him some kind of play in that regard. It allows him to make possibly a little bit riskier plays, like he has done, because he has got the security to be able to bounce any problematic creatures, or if, for example, a Wilt Leaf comes down now, it wouldn't be lethal, so it's okay.
Okay, so Daniela drew his second Archangel Avacyn, so that's not a very useful draw.
With that in mind, Danielle's got to be aware of he's got 2 cards in hand, so he's got to be thinking they're either living ends, more lands, or dead gons. So this double attack makes a lot of sense, you know. And I'm not sure I like the use of the dead gon here. Oh, sorry, the gon side. I think I'd be tempted to take that damage.
I don't like it either. I think he feels forced into it because of the attack that he just made, right? Like, I mean, he's going to go to 3 here, and then Daniela could easily just, go like Dryad, Militant, Fleecemane Lion, because he's got 3 cards in hand, and then suddenly you don't have enough blockers, which is why I don't think I liked his attack last turn.
No, I agree. Wasn't a fan of it, and now he doesn't have the 2 dead gons, so with 1 creature on, he's got to be aware that because he's not cast a creature that there's going to be an Avacyn in hand or something, or at least a threat or removal spell. And he draws another land off the top Copperline Gorge. So that means
to be fair to Warrior Dwarf, he's had some brutal draws.
Absolutely abysmal draws. So
okay, so Avacyn will be lethal here. That'll force him to use another dead gon.
The problem is, because he used the gon, this attack doesn't really make a lot of sense, because now he knows that he's got at least 1 other creature in hand. He's used it. He's already bounced a hand. So if he does get him down to 1, it doesn't really matter, because he's not going to be able to bounce either of them. So he's going to be able to bounce 1 of the 2 creatures. This Avacyn is just seal the deal, really.
Yeah, I mean, he'll use the gon on it. He'll go to 3. Then he won't be able to attack, but then he'll have no recourse for the Avacyn. I mean, I guess he has to draw he has to draw a Violent Outburst into a dead gon, probably, and hope that Daniela doesn't keep up mana for another Archangel.
I think the correct thing to do now is just to let it resolve, go to draw step, hope to draw a Cascade spell, and then, as you say, on Daniela's end step, bounce the other line and swing for lethal. I think that's the best play, as you said.
Well, he's going to have to bounce it here because this is 7 damage.
True, yeah. I think this is, pretty much the end of this one, unfortunately. It's not really what you like to see from any game of Magic, floating out so heavily. But on a mull to 5 is what happens.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, both players did mull to 5, so...
Show of solidarity from both. Mull to 6 in the first and mull to 5 in the second.
Yeah, so I mean, if Daniela, not to say if he's smart, but I feel like his play here should just be to hold up Flash in Avacyn again, because that should take away Warrior Dwarf's out to draw a Cascade spell.
Yeah, I agree. He'd have to draw a Cascade spell, and even then, you'd be sacrificing a better board state. It's just not dying. Because the only thing he's got in his graveyard at the moment is a Monstrous Carabid.
Oh, really? Wow, he really hasn't drawn any cyclers.
No, exactly, and that doesn't even play well into the face of the Fleecemane Lion monstrosity.
And he couldn't find a Cascade spell last game, so yeah, it's been a bit of bad variance for Warrior Dwarf.
So Avacyn goes back to the hand. So we've still got the path to exile, is that correct?
Yes, we do.
So even a living end wouldn't be enough. He'd just path the Monstrous Carabid and then swing for exactly 3.
Does Warrior Dwarf have any way to divination?
No, it's pure cycling. Just 1 card for 1. I don't think there's any outs here from what I can see.
Yeah, even if he drew Cyclone, he doesn't have any cyclers in hand.
So
I do think Daniela played this game very well. I think he played as much as he could around Living End and played to kind of his outs in a few different scenarios. And of course, Warrior Dwarf never had it, so it didn't matter too much at the end of the day. But
So now we are getting the run of cyclers. We've got the Ceradon.
this is just insult to injury, right? The deck finally giving you what you've been looking for 8
Oh,
turns.
absolutely. Any of the previous 5 turns, and this would have been great. But as it stands right now, you can put him to 1, but as we know, that's not good enough. That's without Avacyn being flashed in, or the Path to Exile being used, and he draws yet another land. So not being able to find a single cascade, sorry, one cascade spell across 2 games and over 40 cards is remarkable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it looks like Daniela will be moving on to our semifinals. And that's pretty cool to see, you know? I mean, Living In took down the tournament last time, but now we're going to get some fresh blood, so to speak, a fresh deck. This was Danielle's brew. Very cool brew at that.
Oh yeah, it's always nice to see just a traditional, just beat down aggro deck come forward in what is been for the most part quite grindy or controlling typical top 8s. Something that we've not seen, as you said, and as much as I don't like to say it, it did take down the tournament previously, and it was probably the boogeyman of the tournament. It's one where everyone had Living End on their radar, and to me, a lot of relieved people seeing it not progress into the semis when they look at their own brackets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Daniela's deck is very scary and puts very fast clock on, but most decks have some plan for a deck that's going to throw creatures at them. Whether or not that plan is successful, to be determined. But Living End is much harder to game plan for, especially in a tournament like 5 ticks where you can't play like, Leyline of the Void.
Absolutely. And the consistency of the decks being shown here, not having access to the fetch lands, the consistent mana bases, the card selection that you would typically get really showcasing here, which means that consistent deck building in the way that Daniela's deck does, where you can just reliably curve out, will win the day a lot of the time, as is shown here as he takes it down.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was a great match, and we'll see you for the next one.